So how many of you have ever had a foot in your mouth moment, right? Where you put your foot in your mouth big time and you just say something that either was hurtful or mean or inappropriate, right? And after you say it, you think, ooh, yikes, right? I have a friend, he's a pastor, and he was in his office, and he had a secretary, so his secretary sat outside. And a lady came to see him, and she put her baby carrier and her baby on a chair next to the secretary and went into his office, and she's like, "Hi, Pastor. Hi, how are you? It's so good to see you. I haven't seen you in a while." She's like, "Yeah." He says, "So when are you going to have your baby?" And she said, "My baby's 3 months." "Oh, well, you look great." Like, how do you come back from that, right? And that's just one example of like, ugh. We're going to take a look at James chapter 3. Let's take a look, and we're going to read through chapter 3, and then we're going to go back and break it down. Okay, it says, "Not many of you should become teachers, my brothers, for you know that we who teach will be judged with greater strictness. For we all stumble in many ways, and if anyone does not stumble in what he says, he is a perfect man, able also to bridle his whole body. If we put bits into the mouths of horses so that they obey us, we guide their whole body as well. Look at the ships also. Though they are so large and are driven by strong winds, they are guided by a very small rudder where the will of the pilot directs. So also the tongue is a small member, yet it boasts of great things. How great a forest is set ablaze by such a small fire. And the tongue is a fire, a world of unrighteousness. The tongue is set among our members, staining the whole body, setting on fire the entire course of life, and set on fire by hell. For every kind of beast and bird of reptile and sea creature can be tamed and has been tamed by mankind. But no human being can tame the tongue. It is a restless evil, full of deadly poison. With it we bless the Lord and Father, and with it we curse people who are made in the likeness of God. From the same mouth come blessing and cursing. My brothers, these things ought not to be so. Does a spring pour forth from the same opening both fresh and salt water? Can a fig tree, my brothers, bear olives, or a grapevine produce figs? Neither can a salt pond yield fresh water. Who is wise and understanding among you? By his good conduct let him show his works in the meekness of wisdom. But if you have bitter jealousy and selfish ambition in your hearts, do not boast and be false to the truth. This is not the wisdom that comes down from above, but it is earthly, unspiritual, and demonic. For where jealousy and selfish ambition exist, there will be disorder and every vile practice. But the wisdom from above is first pure, then peaceable, gentle, open to reason, full of mercy and good fruits, impartial and sincere. And a harvest of righteousness is sown in peace by those who make peace." So if you remember, John talked to us about the book of James and who it was written to. So James is talking to a group of people that had kind of attached themselves and thought, "Oh, teaching, I'll do that." And so they had seen the profession or the calling of a teacher and said, "Oh, this is good. If I'm a teacher, I'm respected. I have a position in society, and I can say whatever I want. So I can just say that I'm teaching, and I can cut people off. I can tell people where they're wrong. I can just do whatever I want." And James is addressing teachers at the beginning of this chapter, but really it's something that we can all take from this chapter, and it's wisdom for all of us. So verses 1 through 8. Not many of you, 1 and 2, sorry. Not many of you should become teachers, my brothers, for you know that those who teach will be judged with greater strictness. For we all stumble in many ways, and if anyone does not stumble in what he says, he is a perfect man, able also to bridle his whole body. So how many of you have seen those videos where they ask kids what they want to be when they grow up, right? And they say, "Oh, I want to be this, and I want to be a firefighter, and I want to be..." And then you have the kid that you know is going to grow up to be a troublemaker. And they're like, I want to grow up to be the president of the United States, and I'm going to tell everybody what to do. They already know that a position brings a certain level of power, right? And that's who James is talking to. He's talking to people that know that teachers are held in high regard. And so he's telling them, no. You can't want to be a teacher and not realize that there's a responsibility, right? So he's kind of setting that that stage up, and he's saying, because you're a teacher doesn't mean you can do whatever you want or say whatever you want. The commentary that I read says, when he talks about being perfect, right? Because you're a teacher doesn't mean you're perfect. And because you can control your tongue doesn't necessarily mean you're perfect either. What he says is, James does not believe in sinlessness, nor does any writer in the New Testament. But he does believe that those who have the implanted word can obey the royal law of love. So he's saying, you know better. If you are a teacher, you should be prepared. You should know better, and you should speak based on that. Your words should be from a place that is speaking from wisdom, right? And it says, the commentary also said, I thought this was so good. It says, the perfect teacher is one whose love shapes how he or she teaches and speaks to others. So the way that they craft their sermon, or the way that they craft their teaching, is based on love, not privilege, not position, right? Our last week, John talked about our faith in action, right? Putting action to our faith. And really, when you look at faith in our works, right, what we do, James is talking about our words. Putting our faith and backing our faith up in our words, how we choose our words. So our goal should be to use our position and our title as sons and daughters of God to bless and encourage people. Our social status or our position does not provide us with a pass to be able to talk down to people or to create separation because of what we believe to be our advantage, right? These people did that. They got up on the pulpit, they had the microphone in their hand, and they said, oh, I'm just going to let them have it. Everything that I want to say, I'm going to say it because after all, I'm the teacher. James is saying, can't do that. You have to see the position of a teacher as a responsibility. You have a responsibility, and you have a responsibility to first step into what you're saying before you say it, right? That's a hard one. Let's look at the next section, because he has those first two verses and he talks about teachers, and then he goes on to give this example of what the tongue is capable of. And it says in verse 3, if we put bits into the mouths of horses so that they obey us, we guide their whole bodies as well. Look at the ships also. Though they are so large and are driven by strong winds, they are guided by a very small rudder wherever the will of the pilot directs. So also the tongue is a small member, yet it boasts of great things. How great a forest is set ablaze by such a small fire. And the tongue is a fire, a world of unrighteousness. The tongue is set among our members, staining the whole body, setting on fire the entire course of life, and set on fire by hell. For every kind of beast and bird, of reptile and sea creature can be tamed and has been tamed by mankind, but no human being can tame the tongue. It is a restless evil full of deadly poison. So the first example that he gives is of a horse, right? That small little bit that they have in their mouth is what is used on the reins to guide this big, powerful animal. And James is saying, if that little thing is capable of guiding, right, that's our tongue. That small part, that small little piece of our whole body, right? In comparison to the rest of our body, it's just a small piece. And James is saying, if a large animal can be tamed, right? And when I think of a horse, I think of a horse and a rider, right? The rider is the one that's guiding that horse. And so you think about what the rider is able to see coming towards him. And he guides that horse, right, to the direction that it needs to go. How many times do we see situations in front of us, and our tongue, we have the capacity and the capability of guiding, either stepping into a really bad situation or turning ourselves around, staying quiet and not getting involved in the situation, right? That little bit is able to control the direction of that huge, powerful animal. How about us? How about the control that we have? The bit, like the tongue, can control the direction when we are able to control the tongue, right? And that statement. Some tests are too important to fail, so always be prepared. Knowing that small little thing inside of our mouth has the ability to control the direction that we go. What about the ship, right? When I was looking at the ship, the first thing that came to my mind is that little rudder that guides. And I've been on boats before, so I'm not super familiar, but my first thought was, like, what's the ratio of the rudder size to the size of the whole boat, right? Like, how big does it need to be, or how small does it need to be? What is it that they decide? How do they decide how big that rudder is? And one of the things that I found so interesting when I was doing the research was, it obviously is, there's a ratio and there's all kinds of, calculations that are made. But the thing that's interesting about the rudder is that the rudder responds to the pressure of the water. So the pressure of the water, when the rudder is moved, that's what actually makes it move, right? The pressure of the water guides that rudder, so whatever direction, that pressure moves the boat. What happens to us when we have pressure? When there's pressures that come, and many of us, I include myself, 100%, we're in a pressured situation and we feel compelled to say something. We feel like, well, I have to say something. Well, there's my best example this week, because it's, this week. I train doctors. Part of my job is to train doctors to use our electronic medical record system. And many times, the circumstances are not ideal. And in this case, for this doctor that I was training these past 2 weeks, it was way less than ideal. And she was really, really frustrated. And any opportunity that she had, she just complained about everything. And I felt bad for her, because a lot of her complaints were very valid, right? And she's just, and I just going on and on and on. And just Friday, and I'm not saying that this happens all the time, okay? So I'm not like trying to build myself up, because doesn't happen that often. But she's just going on and just complaining, and I was just listening to her. And in the back of my mind, I just kept saying, just listen to her. Just listen to her. Just listen to her. Because earlier in the week, I had gotten caught up, right? And then I felt like I needed to solve everything for her. And then I got committed to a whole bunch of things by opening my mouth and telling her, okay, let me find out. Let me see if I can take care of it for you. And then before I knew it, I was like so way out of the scope of my job. And I was like, oh man, I should have never opened my mouth. Never, ever done that. So she's standing there, she's going on, and she's telling me all this. And then she just stood there now, and I was listening carefully. I was really listening carefully, because I was waiting for a question, right? I didn't really need to answer if she wasn't asking me a question, right? So I was like, okay. And she just stayed there, and she just looked at me like, so what are you going to say? And I said, I'm going to listen. I said, I am more than willing to listen, but please understand, I don't have a response. And she just looked at me like, oh, really? It didn't make her happy. I'll tell you that right now. She was not happy that I didn't have a response. Because when we're upset, we want an answer. But so many times, because of the pressures, we feel compelled, right? Like the water that's pushing against that rudder, that person that's moving that boat is either going to take that boat into choppier, more dangerous water, or is going to steer that boat to that beautiful little beach where you can have that beautiful picnic on the shore. It's going to depend on the direction that rudder takes. And it's going to depend on the direction that our response, how we control our tongue, is going to take in that situation. And I felt very accomplished because I passed that one, but all week long I had not done well. So I learned it took me till Friday. So I felt very accomplished that I actually did that. Many times it's not necessary for us to respond. It's just not. The last example that James gives is the fire. Living in Southern California, we're aware of fires, right? And how quickly destruction it's in a matter of minutes, hours. And again, because I was interested, there's a rate that they measure forest fires with. So it's called the forward rate of spread. It can move as fast as 6.7 miles per hour in forests and 14 miles an hour in the grasslands. That quickly. And we all know, you hear about the fire at 2:30, and by 4:30 the freeway is closed because it's already completely engulfed. They've got 5 fire stations on site. We realize that. We understand that. James uses this example, and in the example of the horse and the rider, there's a horse and a rider, right? In the example of the ship, there's someone that's steering. In the example of the fire, it's just pure and simple evil, because he says they take the fire from hell itself. So it's taking the fire and knowing it's destructive, right? Knowing that comment, that observation, right, which is what we want to call it in a positive way, which really is not a nice thing. You're saying something that's not nice, or gossip, or whatever it might be, that quickly, that comment. I don't know if it's happened to you, but somebody says something and it's always somebody else, right? Never me. I never say it. Somebody else always says it. And you walk out of the room and then you walk back and it's like everybody's talking about it. You're like, man, that was fast. I worked for an IT company and there were, in the time that I was there, consistent layoffs, right? So it'd be like 4 weeks, and then there would be an email that would go out and it would be timed, and it would go out to 40 people at the same time. So like you would be able to like 10, 9, 8, and within minutes, all the chatter would start in the cubicles. And I wonder why, right? And you would hear all the rumblings. That quickly, that comment, that little one thing that you say. John and I were talking about this, and he said, imagine like the cartoons that have the dragon. It's like fire, and that dragon doesn't just burn that, it starts to spread, right, that quickly. And James says that it's from hell itself. Once it's done, right? Some tests are too important to fail, so we always have to be prepared. What do? Do we go and pick up the fire and go and spread it? Or do we go, no, not doing it. Let's look at James, another section here. I broke it up in sections because I just thought it was so interesting the way that he broke it up. In James 9 through 12, it says, with it we bless our Lord and Father, and with it we curse people who are made in the likeness of God. For from the same mouth come blessing and cursing. My brothers, these things ought not to be so. Does a spring pour forth from the same opening both fresh and salt water? Can a fig tree, my brothers, bear olives, or grapevine bear figs? Neither can a salt pond yield fresh water. So let that sink in for a minute. Just think about that for a second. The word curse here is twofold. It both labels a person socially, but also renders that person standing before God as one that's condemned. So that's what these teachers were doing, right? They were classifying people. They were becoming accustomed to classing people. The rich, the favorable, the desirable, the wanted, the privileged. And of course, on the other side of that coin is always the poor, the unfavorable, the undesirable, the unwanted, and the left aside. So they not only classified them, but they also basically condemned them. You're not even worth. Period. Not even worth, period. That's what these teachers were doing. Proverbs 18:21 tells us, death and life are in the power of the tongue, and those who love it will eat its fruit. The idea that human beings are made in the image of God, and we bless God, we raise our hands to worship God, should remind us that people are blessable. It's not a real word. Our words should be a blessing to people. People were created to be image bearers of Almighty God, made in his image and his likeness. Why do we find it so easy to scream at that person that cuts us off? Idiot! And we think, oh, come on, Myrna, it's just a word. That person is made in the likeness of God. The interesting thing is that we latch on to words that culture, right? If you think about, and I'm going to call them borderline curse words, right? The borderline curse words. If you really think about the definition of those words, doesn't even make sense to call somebody that. It doesn't. But we latch onto them because we know what everybody knows it means. And we know that it's not a good word, it's not a nice word, it's not a helpful word, it's not a kind word, right? But it's easy because it's just a word. And we forget that the people that we use those words with are made in the image of God, right? John talked last week about, homeless people and how easily we're able to identify. Like, we are MDs, we're doctors, we know. They have this illness, mental health, they're crazy, they're drug addicts. And it's like, whoa, right? And the words that we use to describe people classify them, make them less worthy of whatever it is, dignity, respect, because we have the normal and the not normal. And we all know that normal is good and acceptable, and not normal, well, And it's easy for us to make those classifications. And it's like, well, come on, Myrna. Come on. It's just a word. But if we truly want to honor people the way that they should be honored as made in the image of God, we should be selecting our words far more carefully. So if you notice, James doesn't give us permission to curse somebody based on a scale, right? So if they qualify at a 3 out of 5, then you could call them an idiot. It's okay. He doesn't say that. He says, no, how is it possible that you're doing this? How is it possible that you're blessing God and then you're cursing people with the same mouth? And then he talks about the fruit, right? What are you producing? You're producing what's in you. Before I tell you this, let me tell you this little story about those of you that may not know. Growing up, my mom absolutely did not allow the S word, right? You're all like, oh, stupid. We were not allowed to say stupid. So for my mother, bless her, there's just no reason for it. Like, nothing qualifies to be described as stupid. Nobody should be stupid. There's just no reason. It's a useless word. In her mind, it's useless. Find another way. If something is, oh, I can't get this stupid lid off, okay, then use your words. Oh, I'm having trouble with this lid. It's so hard to take off, right? Like, my mother is like a use your words person. So for me, it's really even hard to say this, but you're probably saying, Myrna, but really, this person is stupid. Like, for real. Everything about them. So I should call them stupid because they deserve it, right? The one question that I would ask you, when this came to me, I thought, oh, man, what would I do? If God were standing in front of you and that person were standing next to God, would you ask God, God, why did you make this person stupid? Would you have the nerve to do that? Why is it okay then for us to just blatantly call people things that are stepping on the image of God in them? We're not building up the image of God, right? But it's so easy for us to do that. I wouldn't be able to do it. So I have to think, okay, whatever I'm saying about that person, their actions may be inappropriate. Their actions may be bothering me because they're thoughtless, right? But as a person, they are not stupid. They are made in the image of God. How would that change how we speak to people? How would that change how we interact with people? And would they see our faith? Would they see our relationship with God when we're talking to other people and they say, man, that person deserved to be called stupid and you did it. Kudos to you. Like, wow. That would be an opportunity to say, you know what? It's God. They are made in the image of God. And it's like, yeah, but they're a stranger in a car. I'm just calling a stranger in a car. That cuts me off an idiot. Yeah, well, last time I checked, me personally, I've made mistakes and cut people off by accident. I hope they're not calling me an idiot. I hope they're not. Because I don't think I'm an idiot because I made a mistake every once in a while. But we just easily, freely, just reduce people without really considering the impact that our words have. Matthew 12:36-37 says, and I tell you this, you must give an account on Judgment Day for every idle word you speak. The words you say will either acquit you or condemn you. In any given day, how much of what I say is just not necessary? Idle is not necessary, just. Luke 6:45. The good person out of the good treasure of his heart produces good, and the evil person out of his evil treasure produces evil. For out of the abundance of the heart, his mouth speaks. So in terms that we understand, garbage in, garbage out. That's pretty much what it boils down to. And when we think of this example, the first thing that comes to mind, right, is 3 o'clock in the morning when you stub your toe, right? What's in your heart. And it's like, boom, oh, Jesus, Lord, help me, Father, in the name of Jesus, I pray for my toe. Yeah, not usually. It's like, beep, beep, beep. If they were censoring us, right, there'd be like, beep, 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 beep. And then half an hour later, you're like, beep, who left that beep? Man, that was a beep. And you're, right? Because out of the abundance, what a couple of weeks ago, I had this thought, and I thought, when you're squeezed, right? Out of the abundance of your heart, whatever's in your heart is going to spill out. Ooh. If I were to be squeezed, what would come out? When the pressures come, what comes out? It's whatever's in my heart. That's what James is telling us. So this is an area, I think this one's the one that hit me like, gut punch. Looking at the law of love. So the law of love tells us what? We love the Lord with all our heart, soul, and mind, and love our neighbor as ourself. I don't know about you, but I don't stand in the mirror and say, Myrna, you're an idiot. If I'm going to love my neighbor as much as I love myself, then the way that I direct my words should be using the law of love. And that's what James is telling them. You can't stand there and say, yes, Lord, you're wonderful, you're great. Okay, now I'm going to tell you all that you're worthless, because how could you have lost your properties, you idiots? Didn't you know that you needed to pay taxes? Didn't you know that? Can't do that. And technically, we can. We can. We can say anything we want. But are we ready for the consequences? Are we willing to allow the words that we speak either to reflect our relationship with God or to completely, like, right? And I'm sure you've heard it. The Spanish saying, right? Con esa boca comes. I used to hear that all the time. My dad was a cusser, like a good, one of those good cussers, where you would be like, man, that sounds good. I don't know what it is, it sounds good. And it was like, my mom would always say, con esa boca, the same mouth, out of the same mouth that all of that filth comes out of. You eat all this delicious food, that's what the saying is saying, right? But it's the same basic idea, out of your heart, all of that's coming out. James is telling them, yeah. We need to be driven by the law. He's telling them the law of love. What does the law of love tell us? The law of love should be what is controlling that rudder, right? What's controlling that boat, the direction of that boat. What's controlling that big, powerful animal, right, is the law of love. So let's take a look at the last section. The last section of the chapter is giving us the solution, right? The remedy to controlling the destructive force of the tongue. Verse 13 says, who is wise and understanding among you? By his good conduct, let him show his works in the meekness of wisdom. But if you have bitter jealousy and selfish ambition in your hearts, do not boast and be false to the truth. This is not the wisdom that comes down from above, but is earthly, unspiritual, demonic. For where jealousy and selfish ambition exist, there will be disorder and every vile practice. But the wisdom from above is first pure, then peaceable, gentle, open to reason, full of mercy, good fruits, impartial and sincere. And a harvest of righteousness is sown in peace by those who make peace. James is asking a rhetorical question. Who is wise among you? He knows that none of them are acting very wise, right? Then he presents them with some traits to help them identify. This is the wise group and this is the unwise group, right? There's selfishness, there's jealousy, there's all of these different things. If you're involved in any of this, you're in the unwise group. That's what James is telling them, right? The lack of control of the tongue had shown itself through bad, worse, worst. Earthly, unspiritual, demonic. Like straight up demonic. And I'm sure all of you know people like that, where it's just evil, like they just say mean things. This is a great place to look back at week 1, right? In week 1, the definition that John gave us was, whenever I say John gave us, it sounds like the Bible, PJ. He said, wisdom is a gift from God that allows us to discern how to carry out God's will in everyday situations. Wisdom lets the believer see events through God's perspective. How does God see people? Right? He sees them as made in his image. So if we see things from God's perspective, then that would drive the words that we use towards people. And that's just, a simple example. James 1:5 tells us, if any of you lacks wisdom, let him ask God, who gives generously to all without reproach, and it will be given him. The wisdom that's given to us from God, if you look at the second part of the verse, it says, but the wisdom from above is first pure, then peaceable, gentle, open to reason, full of mercy and good fruits, impartial and sincere. Those are excellent filters for what we're going to say. So is it pure? Yes or no? Is it peaceable? Will what I say bring peace to the situation? Is it gentle? When I say these words, will it be clear that I am open to reason? Right? Many times we shy away from conflict. Well, I'm just not going to say anything. I'm just going to say anything. And I think my observation has been that many times we shy away from what we believe to be conflict because we can't articulate it. It sounds aggressive or it sounds argumentative. And it's like, yeah, but if we select our words and we can show with our words that we're open to reason, let's talk about it. Not walk into the situation, okay, I'm going to agree to disagree. Okay, let's just get it out right now, right? We come with the approach that we're open. Are my words merciful? Mercy is one of those words that it's, I think, sometimes elusive. It's compassionate. Is what I'm going to say compassionate? It says kindly forbearance shown toward an offender, an enemy, or other persons in one's power. So someone that might be considered your subordinate, right? Someone that maybe works under you. Or are my good fruits seen in my words, right? Fruits of the Spirit: love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, gentleness, goodness, self-control, and love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. The 9 fruits of the Spirit. Are my words, will they make that filter? Will they get through there and pass? Are my words showing impartiality? Do they favor anyone? Are they going to point out a group that's going to be beneficial for me? Selfishness, is there selfishness in there? Am I being sincere? Man, those are... James tells us to ask God for wisdom, but he's giving us the filters. He's giving us God's wisdom. If you use these filters, if you use this wisdom that God is giving, how different would our relationships be? We all have been on the receiving end at some point, right? Of harmful words, hurtful words, damaging words, either to our reputation, to our integrity, something, right? And we know what the receiving end. Have we been on the giving end? Have our words damaged someone? Have they caused someone pain? Have we hurt someone because of our words? Verse 18 tells us what we can expect, right? What we can expect. And it says in one verse, and a harvest of righteousness is sown in peace by those who make peace. I love how many examples the Bible gives about planting and sowing. When you put good in, the teachers that James was talking to were itinerant, so they would go from town to town. And he's telling them, when you come back around, if what you did was good and peaceable and merciful and gentle and kind, and you built people up, doesn't mean that we're not going to point out things that need improvement, right? But how we present those things. If you're challenging people to get closer to Jesus and you're telling people, hey, God loves you. He died for you. He wants you to live a life full of peace, right? When those teachers came back around, there was going to be peace in those towns. And that's not what was happening. They were going back and there was contention. They were saying, who are these teachers? How come they're just spewing off whatever it is? And so James is saying, hold on, we got to get this under control. Because this can't keep happening. We can't just let people go off and say whatever they want. We've got to have a way to be able to say, okay, this is what my tongue is capable of doing. This is what you have done. Now let's correct this. How can we correct this? And he's telling them by all of these things. Being peaceable, being merciful, being compassionate, not showing... not separating people, right? Which was what they were doing. So the rich, please come this way, and we're going to direct ourselves. Oh, yeah, you all can hear, but I'm not really going to look at you. That's what was happening. So James is telling them, no, you can't do that, right? How many of you could use some of this? I know I could, right? James is such, this has always been kind of my perspective on the book of James. James is that friend that we all need, right? James is the person that tells you the way that it is, and it's like, that's no. It's the book of the Bible that gives us so much guidance. And this chapter in particular, for those of us, number one right here, that have mouth problems, as soon as I start getting myself into trouble, I go back and I read James 3. Because it is chock full of perspective on what we're capable of doing with our tongue. The same blessing that we bless God with, God has given us the capacity to bless people. The same mouth, right? The same mouth. So can we rise to the occasion? Can we pass those tests, right? Some tests in life are too important to fail, so we have to be prepared. We will be faced. I'm going to keep training doctors. I'm going to keep having doctors that are going to complain to me. Will I pass the test? Right? Friday I was like, yes, I passed the test. I felt so good. I need to continue to do that. And I need to use wisdom, because if I'm going to put the manager in a bad light, I'm going to put, no. I need to watch my tongue to be able to use that situation to say, okay, no, these are the boundaries and this is the parameters. And what I'm about to say is not going to be nice, so I'm not going to say it. It's not going to be merciful. It's not going to be gentle. It's not going to be any of those things. So doesn't pass the filter, just won't come out. And until I can find the right words that will pass the filter, then I'll be able to move forward with what I'm going to say, right? Every Sunday we've been doing this, and I'm just loving it so much. I hope you're loving it as much as I am. We come to the front and we pray together.